Okay.
So hi, Steve. Thank you so much for joining me on Elevate Mind, Music and Business podcast. And as I was saying to you there, I'm really intrigued to hear all about your record collection. So I suppose let's just dive right in. And I've got like a bunch of questions. So I suppose let's kind of start at the beginning. Tell us, okay, how long have you been collecting?
It's hard to pinpoint the exact time when I did start. I'd say probably about 20 years I've been collecting. More seriously, probably in the last 12 or 13 years. But yeah, in total, probably about 20 or 21 years I've been collecting records. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a long time to be kind of collecting so many. You must have like a huge, I mean, how many records do you have now, do you think?
I get asked this a lot. And to be honest, I don't know. It's in my best interest that I don't know, because if my wife found out, she'd make me cull.
Yeah.
So I won't. But look, if the last educated guess was around 1,000 individual piece box sets or 7 inches or LPs, the lot. So I'd say in total it's about 5,000. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, that's a lot, all right. And I can imagine it's not like vinyl or is not cheap. So yeah, that can definitely add up to like, you know, a nice amount of money spent over the past like 20, 25 years. So
Yes.
yeah. So do you actually?
Not a cheap hobby by any means. It's quite, yeah, I wish it was like stamp collecting or something, but no, it's, I had to choose an expensive hobby. Yeah.
Well, looking at your Instagram, actually, some of the records that you've been pulling out, like, you know, for display, are some of my favorite as well. Like when you have like Bjork, you got Pink Floyd and all of that. Like, so there's amazing records there in your collection. So I'm a bit jealous. But tell us, like, what is actually your favorite record? Like, what has been your favorite purchase?
It's, again, it's hard to pinpoint that either, because I think most record collectors would agree that, you know, you'd go a month of loving an absolute record, loving a record in its entirety, and, you know, you're not really listening to much else, and then you kind of find something else, and that original record still holds a very special place in your heart. But I don't know, it's really difficult to pinpoint just one record that's special to me. I mean, I've got about, I don't know, 10 or 20 records that are really either sentimental or they cost a lot of money, or it's really difficult to pinpoint. And you know what, the short answer to that is it just depends what mood I'm in, really. If it's morning, if it's evening, if I'm alone, you know, it really dictates my taste.
That's fair enough. That's understandable. Like, yeah, I don't collect records myself. I do intend to at some point, but I just don't have like space or money really for it, like at the minute. Like, but yeah. So I guess like, what has been, I suppose, like your biggest investment, let's say, as well, like when it comes to records?
Again, I'll speak quietly so my wife doesn't hear.
You can just like,
yeah. I've got an original, and this was really hard to come by up until pretty recently when it was reissued. But for a long time, Janet Jackson's labels over the years just did not reissue any of her stuff. And so a lot of her, especially her earlier records, original copies in good condition would be worth a bomb, especially if they're in really good condition. And so the Janet album, which is the one, I think it's from 92 or 90. It's the one black and white image of someone's holding her boobs, and like it's a really iconic image and really amazing album. I splashed out a fair bit on that, and that was a few $100, which I thought was quite cheap because I'd seen it for close to $1,000, mint copies of it for close to $1,000 Australian. That is. So I bought it for at a little kind of the place you would least expect to buy it. At some little country town. It was a bookshop that just had maybe 100 records in it as well. And it was just crap records. But I always have a habit of looking through just whatever records are in a shop that I'm in. And it was just, you know, horrible, like, you know, John Denver, and just like really, and bad John Denver as well, like just really daggy kind of. And this was in there, sealed in the original packaging with the stickers on the plastic kind of zip bag.
Sure.
And yeah, but they knew it was worth something because they were charging, as I said, a few $100s for it. But I knew to keep an eye out for it because I just couldn't justify spending what I'd seen it for on Discogs or a few other places. But when I came across that about probably 3 or 4 years ago, I couldn't help myself. And that's one of the more expensive ones I've purchased, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was a huge Janet Jackson fan when I was a kid too. So I remember that album, actually, Janet. I think that was what, '93, and Rhythm
Yeah,
Nation as well. That I think she had in 1989. I thought you were going to say Rhythm Nation actually, which I love that album. Like, but Janet is a great
really good
album.
album.
I absolutely love
Really
it.
good album. Yeah,
Yeah,
Jimmy
yeah.
Jam and her producers, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, are just that's a classic example of an artist and a producer working just beautifully, because
Oh,
they had, I
yeah.
think, 2 albums under her belt before Control in '86, and they were pretty mediocre. They were horrible albums. But then, just with their influence and their production methods, and I don't know, it's probably the best, or one of the best, producer songwriter relationships in music history, where you've got a string of albums. I think she had 5 or 6 #1 albums in a row, and I don't think too many artists then or now could claim that. So, and
Yeah.
I put a lot of that down to the relationship between producer and artist.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, I mean, that album is so smooth. And I was only just thinking about the album there recently, thinking I must like actually listen to it again, funnily enough. Like, so I'll definitely listen to it again now. And yeah,
Mm.
speaking of producers, like, would you have a favorite producer that you would always kind of like, look for, or that you like listening to?
Yeah, again, it depends on the time of day, but there are some producers that really kind of stand out in my mind, and people like Quincy Jones. When you hear an album by Quincy Jones, you just know it's a Quincy Jones project, and not just the obvious ones like Thriller or Off the Wall, which are great albums. But when
Yeah,
you hear, George Benson, or when you hear like Shaka Khan and Rufus, and you just hear he's got that sound to where you could tell that his albums would cost a bomb to make, because all the instrumentation,
yeah,
you can just hear that there's at least 30 people in a room playing whatever they're good at playing. And I think that Quincy Jones is good for that. Nile Rodgers, I think, is a really fantastic producer. He's
yeah,
still producing and still performing. Again, when you hear his trademark chucking style of guitar playing, you just know, like when you hear Let's Dance by David Bowie, you just know that's Nile Rodgers. When you hear, obviously, a lot of the Chic stuff, Upside Down by Dinah Ross, when you hear some of the Madonna tracks that he worked on, like he's got that very iconic chucking sound, which I just love, and not many guitarists or musicians can replicate that. So there's a few producers I like. Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis are another one. Teddy Riley did some really cool stuff with Michael Jackson as well in the early '90s. Yeah, yeah.
cool. Yeah, now Rogers is I actually forgot that he did Let's Dance as well with David Bowie. I only actually realised that a few years ago, and I forgot again. Like, yeah, he is.
Yeah,
I mean,
he
he's
did that
absolutely
whole, not just
amazing.
obviously the song, but he did the whole album, the Let's Dance album.
Oh,
And
okay,
that,
did he? Sorry, right. Okay.
yeah, and so like David Bowie, as everyone knows, king of reinvention. I mean, he had
Yeah.
5 or 6 careers in one, and I think Nile Rodgers really helped frame that part of David Bowie's career. That's when he became, obviously, that was probably his most commercial period. And I think it's all down to that album. I think that album is a really good album.
Yeah.
And again, you can hear Nile Rodgers all the way through it, and that's a very good thing. Sometimes you can hear a producer just overdoing it, but not in that instance. I think he was subtle when he needed to be, and he was quite restrained when he needed to be. But when he wanted to show off, he did. And he also played on it. Not many producers play on the album as well, so that was pretty good.
Yeah,
I
that's very
also
true.
love. I also love. If we're talking about producers, I mean, the
Yeah.
guy's a bit of a deadbeat, but I really love Phil Spector. I really love his contribution to the music world is immense.
Yeah.
Despite his personal issues and tribulations, and he's doing time at the moment for
Yeah.
I think second-degree murder or something. But I
Yeah.
mean, his influence on the music world, especially in the '60s and '70s,
Yeah.
like River Deep, Mountain High, what he did with Ike and Tina Turner. Again, he's got one of those knacks of getting an artist who's great and just making them and the audiences realize that, hey, they're not to be pigeonholed. They can do everything, not just this. And I think he did that really, really well. The work he did with George Harrison solo stuff, John Lennon solo stuff, he's obviously brought the Let It Be album to life. Without his influence, Let It Be just would have been shelved. And so he brought it back to life after the band broke up. And did that. So and I also love the work that he did with the Ronettes and the girl groups of the
Mhm.
60s and all that kind of stuff as well. So
Yeah, that's what I kind of remember him for, like mainly is like the sort of very sort of 50s, 60s style of like, the Ronettes and artists like that. But yeah, and even actually I don't know if, yeah, 'cause I mean, I love watching music documentaries and things like that too. I did watch one of Phil Spector a good while ago. But more recently then, David Foster, have you seen the Netflix documentary?
I haven't, no. It's on my Netflix, it's on my Netflix to watch list.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm pretty familiar with his contribution as well. Like, there's
yeah.
only a handful of those really big names who have contributed just above and beyond what they could have or should have contributed, and he's one of them, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. Just because, like, as you were saying there, like when you really kind of push an artist, like when you kind of see it, then like, you know, in a documentary where you have like contemporary artists, like everyone kind of knows and loves, and how he actually really does push them. Like it's great to kind of see it like in a documentary style, because you really have more of appreciation, and you can know it and you can hear about it, but when you actually watch it, then it's like, wow, it's kind of, yeah, it really does kind of bring it home that like how they contribute, yeah, to music, for, you know, for sure, 100%. So I suppose, like, what are you working in the music industry yourself, or are you just completely a collector? Do you DJ with your vinyl at all? I don't know, it's frozen. Shit. No. Okay, I don't know if you can hear me.
No, I wish.
Okay, it's back. Sorry, it was frozen
I
there
mean,
for like a few seconds.
I've dabbled in DJing before, but
Oh no. What happened? He's gone. Okay, I'm gonna have to pause and restart. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, recording.
internet's always good.
So yeah, so sorry about that. Yeah, so tell us again, like, about, yeah, you know, what you do with music, and if you're DJing, and how you're displaying these records, or are they completely private?
More the latter, to be honest. Yes, I've DJed in the past, but I don't DJ, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
got friends who are DJs, and I've dabbled in it. I wish I was better at it, because I actually really appreciate the art form. I think it's great, but I don't DJ. I pretty much collect primarily for my own. It's my preferred listening method. I mean, 9 times out of 10, when I listen to music at home, it is via vinyl. And I've always just loved the format of vinyl. I've always loved the ritual of playing vinyl, be it when I'm alone or with friends, or, you know, if we've got people over, or the case may be. But yeah, I always just, it's a me thing. It's my personal
Sure.
pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've wanted to for years, but I just haven't kind of like begun. And because I mean, I've been traveling a bit, and, you know, I mean, I'm in Ireland now, but I'm from Cork. But I live in Dublin, and probably might move back to Cork at some point. Like, so I'm kind of a bit everywhere. But yeah, no, I think I definitely, when I kind
It's
of
hard
like
to move.
settle in a spot, huh?
Yeah,
So again,
it's really hard to. It's if you travel,
yeah,
or if you're an expat or whatever, it's really difficult to take your vinyl collection with you. All my friends,
yeah.
all my Australian friends who live overseas, just leave all their records here in storage, which is
Oh.
just too difficult.
Yeah, no, so exactly. So I'd love to kind of like, yeah, just, you know, start collecting now at some point, you know, bit by bit and whatnot. Like, what record player do you use, or what you play them on?
I've got a Project Classic,
Okay.
which I've had for, I think, about 3 years now. It's real. I mean, anyone who follows me sees it in a lot of the shots. It's a really, I love the minimal styling of it. I like how it looks a bit retro, but it's not retro, or vintage. It looks, it's very sleek. As I said, it's quite minimal. There's no bells and whistles or buttons with it. It is what it is. It does what it does, and it does it really well.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, so I've got that connected to an Audifon black stylus as well, which that's, you know, I've gone through the Audifon stylus as I've started with blue, then red, and now I've upped it to the black. And it's not cheap, but I think you could definitely hear the music better. And it's the kind of thing where you got to wear it in. It's one of those weird ones where, you know, I think, you know, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 hours of listening before it kind of finds its groove, pardon the pun. But once it does find that, it's amazing. It's got that real warmth and that depth that a lot of record lovers are craving.
Fantastic. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I'm just kind of like, you know, playing it in my mind, like what I would invest in, like if when rather I do start collecting, you know, what kind of record player would be good. So, okay, Project, yeah, I'll definitely look into that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I often get asked is, you know, does vinyl really sound better? Is it better than CD? Is it better than MP3? My experience with it, and I'm not a hardcore audiophile by any means. There's a lot of people who are a lot techier than me and really get into the nuts and bolts of it. But in my experience, it is more superior only if all your components are up to scratch. You're only as good as your weakest component. So you can have amazing speakers, an amazing amp, a beautiful turntable, but if you've got a horrible stylus, it's going to sound dreadful. Or you can have a great stylus and horrible speakers, it's going to sound horrible. So if all your ducks are in a row and if everything is up to scratch and all your components are high quality and in good condition, I believe the sound is far superior. Again, that's just me. People might disagree with that, but that's just in my experience.
No, I think that's kind of correct, actually, because we know over the years I've heard that 100%, you know, but yeah, of course you do have to have everything, like, you know, right. You've got to have like the right, the needle, the stylus. You have to have, you know, good speakers and everything else. And once you do, I mean, like, sure, vinyl is the original, and I mean, a lot of DJs as well, like, would use vinyl, like, you know, as a preference if they can. Because of sound quality, because again, if you're going to be pumping money into like the investment of playing it, like, then obviously you're going to, you know, it's going to be a superior sound. You're doing it for a reason.
And also, on that as well, I mean, when I first started out collecting, like a lot of collectors, you start with more kind of basic equipment, and a lot of the time that means cheaper equipment. And so, which is fine. I mean, you got to start somewhere. And I would find myself churning it in every couple of years, and it's quite wasteful because, you know, had I just invested properly the first time, I'd be, you know, so the stuff I've had now, I've had for quite some time, and I don't see myself replacing any of that stuff anytime soon, because I love the sound of it, and I also love the look of it as well. I think it's got to be a treat for the senses. I mean, there's a lot of high quality, amazing sounding equipment out there that is just quite ugly, frankly. And I love the look of my equipment. And I really love vintage audio equipment. Even though none of my car components are vintage, I think both my amp and my turntable look vintage, and they sound vintage. They've got that warmth. And that's what I love about my stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think having that warmth is really important, because that's kind of like all part and parcel of actually listening to records, besides the whole, you know, tangible effect as well, and the classic effect and everything else too, and just the whole action of it, you know, taking it out, putting it on. It's so much fun. Like that now, and a glass of wine sounds like an ideal evening. So I'm going to have to start sooner than later. So I suppose, like, what's your goal with your collection? Like, do you have anything sort of specific in mind? Or even as well, like, is there a particular album like that you're just dying to get your hands on? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
always.
Anyone who follows me or anyone who knows me knows that I'm a huge Prince fan, and he's without a doubt my favorite artist. And so a lot of his stuff, it's starting to be reissued now, which is great. But in a way, and I always enjoy it when a label reissues music, because I think it gives more people an opportunity to get in on it, which is fantastic. But I don't know, it's with a lot of Prince's stuff, I already had a lot of it on vinyl. When it was, you know, a lot like the Janet stuff, it was released back when it was released, and it never got reissued because of label disputes and all that kind of stuff. So I've always held those albums very close to my heart. But I feel now that, especially because a lot of his albums from that period, that 90s period, and also some of the 80s stuff, has started to be reissued now. It's kind of lost that exclusivity about it. It's like, okay, now everyone could get it. It's no longer my little thing. It's no longer my little, you know, guilty pleasure. I mean, anyone, you could just go to a local, you know, shop and pick it up, which is great, because I've had so many people who, you know, because I've just bored them to death with Prince, gone and find out about, you know, Prince, and they've gone and bought his stuff. It's like, oh, that's great. And it's, on one hand, artist discovery is fantastic. When you discover a new artist, it's the best feeling in the world, because you keep digging and digging and digging and finding all this amazing stuff about them. But I know, I think a lot of the exclusivity around Prince in particular is gone. But if there's one album, to answer your question, if there's one album I really would love to get my hands on, it's the Black Album, which I don't know the story behind the Black Album, but he released it. He was scheduled to release it in, I think, around 87. And then he had an epiphany, a chemically induced epiphany, let's just say that. And he thought it was evil. And so he pulled it. After Warner Brothers released it, I think a day after it's released, or the day before it was due to be released, can it. And so they pulled all the copies they could some of those original boxes will float out because they were retailers and whatnot. And so if I could get my hands on one of those, it's really cool. There's heaps of bootleg, got a bootleg version, but I'd love it. I'd love an original. I'd love an original because, I mean, yeah, it's just so hard to come by. And I believe it's one of the most expensive albums ever sold on Discogs. Like, you're talking thousands for one of those original copies of the Black Album.
Wow, amazing. That sounds like it would be definitely a find and a half. I didn't actually know about the Black Album at all, or like its history or backstory.
You can listen to numerous sources online. It's so fun, and it's just cool. It's a really cool album. And I kind of like that he pulled it because it's made it even more mysterious and hard to come by. Fans know it, but yeah, I think and more people are finding out about it. But it's it's a 35-year-old project, but it's so cool, so funky in that real minimalist Minneapolis style funk that he pioneered. It's a really, really cool album. Really cool.
Amazing. I'll have to check that out for sure.
Definitely. Highly recommend it.
And have you bought albums, I suppose, like, internationally, if you've been traveling, have you bought like albums overseas and that, or you kind of just, do you have, like, what would be your favorite record shop, or what has been your favorite record shop besides the one where you randomly found Janet? Are there any?
Well, that wasn't a record shop. That was like a used bookshop. It had like a crate of.
Even better. It sounds great.
So yeah. I mean, obviously, living in Sydney, I'm pretty familiar with all the record stores here. And we've got some pretty good ones. For a city of our size, we've got 5 or 6 really good quality record stores. My favourite here in Sydney is Red Eye Records, and anyone who's been to Sydney or anyone who's from Sydney would know Red Eye. It's got a really solid variety of virtually any artist and any genre you could think of, which is quite cool. Internationally, yes, I always like to pick stuff up when I do travel overseas. It is restricting because of the weight and the clunkiness of it, tied in with all your luggage and whatnot. It's quite impractical. But I mean, New York is a mecca of record stores. That's pretty cool. London's got a really cool record scene as well. And a lot of places that you'd least expect would have a really thriving record culture. Like places like Indonesia have an amazing record culture. Like, you'd be surprised. In Jakarta, in Java, there's a lot of record stores there. In Athens, in Greece, there's quite a few as well. So yeah, but I mean, the vast majority of my collection has been sourced here in Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I suppose places like Jakarta and Java, I guess, like, maybe they kind of, it's sort of more original because it's still kind of like very old school in a lot of ways. So I guess it kind of makes sense that maybe they would have, like, still a thriving record collection. But that's really interesting to know because, yeah, I do intend to like do the traveling again at some point whenever we return back to semi-normality, the next like year or two, fingers crossed. And so that's definitely something I'll actually keep in mind. Yeah, because it wouldn't have been something I would have like thought of initially.
No, you don't. And also, you come across it on Instagram. Obviously, there's huge vinyl community on Instagram, and you just see where people are from. Like, you're scrolling through and you see their collection. Like, wow, this is a really solid collection. Where's this girl from, or where's this guy from? And yeah, they're from like Rio de Janeiro or Bali, or some really off the beaten track places that you just wouldn't expect. But you know what? To be fair, they're surprised that there's a record scene in Sydney. So
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
it's a good.
Excellent. I'm curious, I suppose, I won't keep you too long more, but just to kind of like finish off, what advice would you give to people like that are starting or looking to start a record collection, and maybe they're just not sure like where to start themselves or what, like, so yeah, to aspiring record collectors, what advice would you give?
Back to my earlier point, I think equipment is important. I know it's easiest to get the cheaper stuff, but if the hobby sticks, which more often than not it will, I guarantee you get rid of that cheap within a year or so. Did I just cut out for a moment? Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry, you totally froze there. So do you mind telling us that again? Sorry.
No. Where do you want me to go from?
So just, yeah, I think at the beginning, like when you were kind of like just about to like divulge the advice you're about to give, you said with equipment and then it froze. So yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think equipment is really important because if the hobby takes off, I guarantee you that you'll be throwing in that $100 all-in-one record player you bought at the local hi-fi shop for something better. I think equipment's quite important. From a collecting perspective, start with the artists you know and love. Because if you go, if you start experimenting with someone you've never heard of before, as I said before, it's not a cheap hobby. You don't want to drop $30, $40, $50 on an album that you might like. So start with something that you know you're going to like, and then you kind of build your collection from there. I love, as I said before, artist discovery. Like I shamefully only very recently, and when I say recently, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, really started getting into Leonard Cohen. And nothing's given me more joy than going into record stores and finding old Leonard Cohen records. Even his more recent stuff I really enjoy. And so just, again, if you know a bit about an artist that you love, discover that artist more, and a record shop is a perfect place to do that.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Yeah. Because I mean, I have bought records in the past, all right, like just at the very, early days. And they've been just kind of random things, and I still have them. So I've got about 3. So I can, I've got like a tiny little collection of 3, but I intend to obviously
What 3 records are they?
They're just random ones that I got because I decided I bought this is going back now. Oh my God. Like I think when I was a teenager or something like that, I bought like a DJ in a box. Because I was like, belt drive, all that, like I had like little aspirations. So I just bought these random, I think it was like Kamikaze or something, records I just, to play around with, and they're just still there under my bed somewhere. So I have to kind of pull them out and just see. But I mean, I don't have, I sold the DJ in a box afterwards because I wasn't really using it. And so I have to get back into it again. But yeah, I mean, I have like an extensive CD collection from when I was younger, because I was like, obviously love music, but obviously a lot of them too, of course, my favorites are all scratched and things like that. But I have like them all in cases, which are CDs are no good really. I mean, it's, if I could, swap it for vinyl, I'd be sorted. I mean, I've got like hundreds and hundreds of CDs, but yeah, so I think though it's kind of a good thing nearly in a way, because I can kind of go back to basics, as you say, like, to, what I like, artists that I love. I mean, like say Janet Jackson, even for example, or Off the Wall, again, Michael Jackson, a great album too that I love and listen to every now and again too, as a bit of a treat, like, and as a guilty pleasure, as you say. So yeah, even like with things like that, it's a really good point to kind of start with albums that you're going to listen to over and over, because it's a good investment and it's an expensive investment too. So yeah. I think that's sound advice. So cool. Listen, Steve, thank you so much for hopping on this evening and all the rest of it, and having a chat. And listen, enjoy your beer, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye on you anyway on Instagram. So what is your Instagram actually, so people can follow you?
It's Steve Kouta, so STEVEKOUTA.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Well, listen, Steve, again, thanks so much. And what I'll do is I'll actually send you a link for the podcast once it's up. And yeah, have a great evening.
No problem. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care then. Talk again.
Okay.
Bye.